Hello and welcome to another bonus episode of It's No Secret. Money Moments is where we chat to real Kiwis about their experiences with money. Today we're chatting to Ryan Potter, senior developer and all-round good human. Ryan has been working alongside Kat and I for roughly 2 years and has kindly offered / forced today to chat through his financial journey to date, everything from buying a house to changing jobs, which he is literally about to do during a recession. So firstly, welcome, Ryan. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, no problem. Blink twice of him being forced to be.
Yeah, literally. I'm just going to jump straight in because I've got to get to the juice fast. Would you mind starting by telling us about your relationship with money growing up, please?
Yeah, sure. So my relationship growing up was very transactional. Like, we didn't have a lot of it. Mm-hmm. So the kind of advice that I was always given by my mother was like, have a savings account. And like, that's how it just ended. There was no more advice there, which is, I think, quite an old kind of way of thinking, because savings was so good and there was nothing really you had to do. But solo mum with 3 kids, not putting much into investments. Yeah,
right. So she really encouraged you to start young, I guess, to and drum that habit.
Yeah. Had the old piggy bank out, and that would fill up. And then she actually had control of a bank account that when I started working, that in order for me to remove cash, she'd have to co-sign onto it, which in hindsight is a really good idea. Because, a teenager with access to all of their savings is not a good idea.
Yeah, speaking from experience, having that exact access and blowing it all, I can relate to that.
There would have been a lot more pies from the tuck shop purchase, that's for sure.
Or moosies or something. So did you have a part-time job when you were younger?
Yes. I think my first job was I swept a factory for like a graphic design place that was kind of like adjacent to my stepfather's work, and they just needed some help around the place, so I used to work on the weekends, and they paid cash, which was about 3 times the minimum wage for kids at that stage, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's legit. So did you just chuck that in your bank account, or did you spend it?
Yeah, just went all straight into the bank account, which I never really questioned. It was just like, yeah, go work. And I was like, cool. Do I get to see any of the benefits of this?
I also had that exact experience. So what did you spend money on? Like, how did you get the money to spend? Did that just come from your mum? Or because if you earn the money and then you put it in a bank account to go buy I
was 10. I wasn't exactly like spending up large back then.
Yeah.
But I think my first actual job where I got to participate in the removal of the cash was like the classic work at a supermarket, work at McDonald's, then just blow all of that on petrol and food and going out with your friends with your newfound independence.
Yeah, nice. And what age was that?
14.
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, so you started working quite young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good.
I think it was a good experience in terms of kind of getting a work ethic and kind of understanding pretty early about your money can go very quickly if you spend it, when I could have learned that a lot later and had a lot more kind of loss instead of the $7 an hour you get. You're like, oh no, my $30 is gone. Upwards of an actual salary, and be like, oh no, I've spent all that money.
Yeah, true. And you have 2 sisters, from what I understand.
Yes.
Was the same kind of money habits instilled with them? Did they start with a part-time job? How would you say that you compare?
Yeah, I'd say pretty much exactly the same. They both had part-time jobs very, very early. Both my elder sister went into nursing school pretty much straight away. So she was working, and then they get placements and things where they work in the hospitals. And my younger sister went through a bunch of different jobs and now works in finance. So
yeah, nice. Clearly the habits translated into a great career path.
Something like that. We all fall into it somehow.
So true. So I guess in terms of timeline, you all seem to have the part-time jobs, and then what happened when you graduated high school from there in terms of career and money journey?
Myself?
Yeah.
I actually went straight out of high school into working full-time before I kind of lucked into going back to study, which is really good. At the time wasn't great because, everyone else is going their career paths, and I'm just kind of like, what am I doing? And just, working and then partying every weekend instead of doing anything with that money.
Yeah.
But I think that really made me appreciate when I went to actually go and pursue the career the career path that I wanted to go down. Really put my full effort into it, and then working with kind of student loans and living accommodations and things like that, and having the understanding of my income and outgoings was really handy to be able to manage being able to get to university and have all of my things paid for, like living in a shared flat, at a young age, and getting those things sorted really helped me, and still being able to put some money away because, of course, your car breaks down, you need to buy a new laptop, things like that.
Life
all these
happens.
unknown expenses as a student, and still being able to go out and socialize as you want to do as your 500 high school friends dwindle down.
So did you find that coming out of uni, you had a buffer of money that you'd saved up?
Absolutely not.
No, you spent it all.
Pretty much had to live. I think I had allocated for myself $10 a week for petrol, and that was like the last of my fun money was being able to drive.
Right.
So buses into uni, obviously.
Yeah.
And then it was pretty tight. Like I worked part-time and studied and then tried to do things. But the savings at that time was essentially nothing, which made me really, after having that kind of buffer beforehand, having that kind of, albeit small, kind of emergency fund, and then going back to nothing and really knowing that if anything went wrong, you don't have anything, was something I didn't want to be doing again.
So just to clarify, you had your part-time job and then you had this lump sum of money that you had been putting away all this time.
That
and
just
then,
kind of siphoned as
you
kind
lived.
of like life happened,
Yeah, okay, cool. And then you went to having no money while you studied, and then you came out to start your first job.
Yes,
I assume.
that's right.
Yeah, and how was that, earning for the first time, I guess?
Oh, it was amazing because, well, when I graduated, it was the year after the 2008 recession, like the financial crisis.
Oh, right.
So just being able to get a job was amazing. And I think, to be fair, the employers at that time really were kind of using that to be like, better not
40K
negotiate for salary because you should just be really happy to have a job.
yeah. And so you loved the reality of that.
Yes. So my first job was awesome, really. Worked with a really great bunch of people, kind of graduated, and then all kind of started there together. Was my first development job, learning a lot of stuff on site in terms of what it was like to actually earn some real money and not be kind of, getting your, will I get 20 hours a week this week, being part-time, going to, this is my set amount of time, this is my set amount of money. Now I can start being like, okay, well, every month this amount of money is going to come in, and what am I going to do with it? How am I going to funnel that? Do I want to have a purchase that I'm looking for in the future? Because obviously I was young, and what car am I going to get?
Yeah, where am I going to travel?
Not thinking quite about am I buying a house yet? A very far off dream at that stage.
Yeah. So your first salary, do you mind sharing what that was?
I think it was $33,000 was my first salary.
And that was full-time?
That was full-time, yeah.
What year was that?
2010.
Wow, that's quite low.
Yes.
I'm quite shocked. Even with inflation and things, that's, I don't think I've ever heard of a starting salary lower than like 45.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, really?
I think my second job, which was it must have been almost 2 years after that, I bumped up by like almost 40%, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. So low bar, but easy to progress with your salary.
Yeah, I think it's also just like a case of the job at the time. Like I was essentially just farming out WordPress websites as a developer, which is pretty low skill.
Yeah, right.
But not to patronize anyone who's doing their job.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was the software that we were using was very easy, and then the things that we were doing, pretty much anyone could have done. But they wanted the kind of people who could, I guess, progress into different avenues of the business and kind of do more custom development work, which is what we eventually were capable of doing.
Yeah.
Where if they just kind of kept the rate that it was with anyone, that they wouldn't have been able to do that later.
Yeah, right. Okay. Complete side question. Do you know how that compares to a starting salary for a developer today?
Starting, I would say, for that particular kind of job,
Yeah.
I would say the beginning for that job would probably be about 45, 50K, I would say.
Still? Oh, okay. I was under the understanding that a starting salary for a dev was a lot higher than that, but maybe that's the type of role.
Yeah,
That was.
so that role in particular,
Yeah.
in terms of like now. So back then there wasn't a huge amount of options in terms of like software that you could use. There was for like CMS solutions that were good for kind of any type of thing that you're doing. Well, now we have such a huge breadth of software that is actually good and can be used by so many different people. You've got like Squarespace and Wix for all the easy, quick marketing sites that you can build in a day. Well, back then you didn't really have that. So now the junior roles that you do have that start higher are far more complicated, and why it's actually really hard for junior devs to kind of get their foot in the door, because they're expected to know so much more in terms of their skill set, and companies are looking for those kind of like full stack juniors when they don't. It shouldn't be expected of them to know half of the things that that companies are hoping to farm out of them.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think that's because like a lack of awareness, or like it seems quite unrealistic for companies to expect that from a new grad? Like, why do you think that they are?
I think it's because they eventually find someone.
Yeah, right.
So
unicorn.
you wouldn't kind of put those jobs out there unless you did find this kind of unicorn. I don't think it's realistic of what they should be looking for, or what people should realistically be applying for. Some people get a bit desperate and they might have a few more years in experience, but they will take a junior role. Because it is quite difficult. And once you get past that kind of barrage of, because there's a lot of kind of like boot camps and things, and people are self-taught. Like a lot of my work was self-taught, and kind of getting into those when you feel like you have a perceived skill, or like you're like, well, I know 60% of that job, I'll apply for it. And people who perhaps don't have that confidence will see that and be like, I don't tick all the boxes, I won't apply. When the people who perhaps like, well, I'll learn that as I go, perhaps will get those roles, or they'll fake it till they make it and get in. Well, when you get to kind of like your intermediate, your senior stages, you can't really fake those qualifications.
Yeah, especially not in such a technical field.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess changing tack, but also on the career note, you are personally changing jobs within the next kind of couple of weeks. And we have had a lot of questions come in about, how do you navigate a recession with regards to your career, whether that's changing jobs or upskilling or things like that. So first question is, how did you find the job market out there as a developer currently?
I think mine was a bit unique because I've been doing this for over a decade. So I generally get my LinkedIn filled with people coming and saying, just slipping in, be like, hey, how's it going?
Slipping into the DMs.
Yeah, absolutely. So this particular place contacted me last year. I initially, like I always do, have like a little copy pasted thing, just like, thank you so much for contacting me.
Do you have a standardized reply to say no?
Oh, yeah.
You're in hot demand, clearly.
I wouldn't say hot demand, but like, you don't want to be rude, because like, I know what it's like to reach out to people to try and get them to the job, and the worst thing that can happen is they say nothing, because then essentially you're just like a cold lead that just sits there forever. Well, at least if you can say, hey, thanks, but no thanks, they can be like, okay, we'll close that avenue off, or thanks, but perhaps think of me in the future. Then you can keep that relationship going. You never know what can happen in that kind of sphere later on. So this one in particular, they'd reach out to me, and then I had initially said no, and then I got back into contact with them kind of about 6 months later. It was like I kept thinking about the role that you put through, so let's see what's going to happen here.
Cool.
In terms of people going around and looking at the job market now, in our sphere, like it's pretty similar to other jobs. I think you just take a look at what's going out there in terms of job roles that you can find, and whether it be Seek or Indeed or things like that. Just see. I used to just set up a little alert on a bunch of those websites, come through every week, have an idea of what I wanted to be doing, have an idea of what the salary I wanted. I think that is something that's getting really a lot better in the industry, is people actually providing upfront benefits and salaries in these roles. Before it was kind of like this ethereal, we pay market rate or upwards of market rate. And you're like, which market rate is that? Which market rate is that? But now people are generally pretty happy to disclose that before. So my first protocol is generally to ask people what the salary range is for a role like that, and what the kind of going forward process is for reevaluating that with KPIs or long-term strategies. And recruiters are onto that. They know. And if people aren't willing to say to disclose that to you, then probably that's not a place that you should be going for.
Red flag.
Yeah.
For, I guess, development in particular, there's been a lot of articles around, or coming off the back of COVID really, that, over the COVID period we were such in high demand. And do you think that still stands true? I mean, I guess you had literally had people continuously in your DMs, but in terms of, I guess, the salary point, and overinflated salaries then versus now, do you think that still stands true? Do you think that's firstly applicable in your eyes to developers?
I think it's an interesting question. I think we saw a lot of, I don't want to say overinflated salaries, because it's kind of hard to judge what in terms of, because it's a value proposition role, right? Like if you're going to bring someone in who can add value to your business, like what does that mean for salary? And that's true to kind of any kind of job. I definitely saw that there was huge salaries that were coming out after COVID. I'm not sure whether that was because they couldn't get people coming in back from overseas, or they had hiring freezes in for perhaps a year while they were kind of evaluating what their businesses were doing, or perhaps they'd reevaluated what they're doing. They needed to get someone in quickly to kind of get that ball rolling. Yeah. But I think it's kind of come down a little bit in the last, I'd say 6 to 8 months, back to higher than it was before COVID, but not at the levels that we were seeing kind of straight away, where people were really trying to get these ideas out. Okay. And I don't know if that's just because, like, realistically it hit them that perhaps it's not what they wanted to do, or they got the people that they needed to fill those roles. Yeah,
right. Okay, that's good to know. And again, another side tangent. Just because I'm curious more so than anything else, do you have an idea of, like, I guess, experience and value add and rough pay or like salary brackets for different levels of experience within development? Like, off the top of your head, could you rattle them off?
I would say I'll just speak to kind of front end. I don't like to say engineering, because I know, like, job titles are weird, but I was like, if you try and say you're an engineer in Canada, you get arrested, if you're not.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, they get a little ring that they can wear to say that they've graduated from engineering school. Oh. Because it's kind of dangerous to be like, I'm an engineer, and like, okay, go build that bridge. And you're like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Let me just go on ChatGPT and ask for some specs on how to build bridges. So front end, I'm just going to say front end only. So someone a junior who could perhaps is reasonably fluid with HTML, CSS, they can do a bit of JavaScript, perhaps they've had some experience with playing around with some frameworks. I would expect them to be around the kind of 55 to 75 mark, depending on their experience and whether they're working in an enterprise or like a startup or a small kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Intermediates, I would say, would be like 90 to 120, depending on the company size, what they're doing, where they are in their career. We have these kind of titles for junior, intermediate, senior, but it's kind of difficult when you have someone who is perhaps retrained, or they have a skill set that's really good for something else. So, for instance, we have someone in our team right now who's an intermediate back-end developer, but who's learning a bit of front-end. Like, what would you class that person as? So there's a whole bunch of different value adds there. But a senior could be, again, huge. Like, a senior could be someone who has received that job title but been in their company for like 3 years at a small place, compared to someone who's had to go through like a bunch of enterprise 10 years and finally got their kind of whatever qualification that they've put in at that company to be there, and they've kind of been in the industry for a lot longer. That could be anywhere between 110 to 250, and then you get all your little weird things. So you hit that senior, and then where do you go from there? Do you become a manager? Do you create your own little title that has been assigned to you, or you've created on your own? You've become a super rock star ninja. Is that what developer. You are? that was a big thing around the initial 2010s, was people were calling themselves rock star developers or superstar developers, like having it on their business cards. Nice. I think we can all look back on that and just cringe a little bit.
Yeah. I reckon that probably applies to every department as well in some way. It's like, I think I've seen one that's like chief doer of things or something like that. Yeah,
I guess you could say you do anything in that company.
Well, literally. And in a startup, everyone literally does everything, right?
Oh, absolutely. So, you wear all the hats. Yeah. I think I've been a designer, copywriter, front-end, back-end, everything at one stage at startups.
I can also vouch for that. But that was a perfect segue into, I guess, the conversation around specialization versus management and generalist. You have taken the path of hardcore specialist.
Yes.
That's correct. Why?
Personally, I just am not a good manager. I don't have any interest in managing people. Mm-hmm. I enjoy mentoring people. I like helping people along with their career, but in terms of like reporting and doing that kind of stuff, it's just not for me.
Yeah, fair
And then it's not for those people either. I'm very emotive with my kind of work, and having to have people around, they'll get annoyed with me very quickly and I'll annoy them. So I just stay away from that. And, it's very common for kind of developers to reach an age where perhaps, well, not age, but they reach a part in their careers where they don't exactly want to keep staying on the tools. They don't want to, they're like, listen, I've been doing this long enough. I'm not that passionate about it anymore, but I want to stay in the company. I want to keep in the sphere of technology. So I might move into management, or I might move into planning or something like that. And that's great. It's just not my interest. And you know what? Sometimes just because you're good at tech doesn't mean you're a good manager.
You heard it here first, people.
I've seen that a few times.
Yeah. Again, I reckon that definitely applies to every department or even organisation. You do reach a point where it's like, well, where to from here? The easy step can be to move into management, but the question is, are you going to be a great manager for the people around you?
Well, I mean, like being a good manager is a huge skill. Like it's so much more than what I think a lot of people realize when you talk to your manager. You just kind of like have your catch-ups, and they do all those kind of things, but they do so much work behind the scenes, and they're doing so much kind of backwards and forwards with like the executive teams and making sure that everyone's on the right track. And I think just some people step into that role and they realize how much it is. So there's the classic like, I'll do 50% on the tools. I'll keep building things. I'll keep building software, but then I'll do 50% management. And I've never once in my life seen that happen. It's like, okay, now I'll do 60% management. I'll do 90%, and then I'll occasionally help out with, now I'm a manager now. Like, I don't have any time.
It's happened.
Yeah, but on your point for specialization, that's another interesting one, especially in the field right now. It's do you kind of go all in on a piece of technology, and then where does that lead you if perhaps that technology goes out of vogue? Or do you be a generalist, but then perhaps you're worried that you don't have the knowledge that's deep enough to perhaps get those like top pay brackets and something? And that's something that needs to be evaluated kind of by each individual person, and what their kind of goals are, what they want to be doing, what they enjoy doing. I enjoy kind of being a generalist in like a smaller scope. So where I used to be kind of full stack across the back end and the front end, now I kind of have cut off the like heavy back end stuff and focus more on really nailing down front end, but still having good kind of bridge between back end and front end as well, which I really enjoy. And it lets me kind of annoy back end people much to their annoyance, because I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to actually do it myself, which is the worst kind of person. They're like, hey, how about you do it like that? They're like, no, that's not bad.
You don't sit with us. You're not in the back.
Exactly.
Have you found that decision between specialist versus management has impacted your like earning ability?
Yeah, I would say so. Obviously, if you want to go outside of New Zealand and be a manager at like a fan company, you can be earning big dollars. But I think for New Zealand, being a specialist, I keep my skills up to date. I get to work on a lot of different projects, which keeps me engaged when I don't think I would do that being a manager. Again, don't like being a manager. Don't want to be a manager. You heard it here first. I don't want to listen back on this podcast in 5 years as a manager and be like, oh, shit.
Ryan, I sold out. That also brings me to a point. We have spoken about that exact thing of kind of in development, you have to keep upskilling and with these new technologies, and you kind of reach a point where, or you've said that maybe you fear that you'll reach a point where you just aren't interested in learning these new things. And so you kind of have to capitalize on your earning capacity now while you're, is that correct? Did I interpret that right?
I suppose you could say that. I think one of the big things is, like we were talking before about juniors not having like the knowledge that they would perceive to have. So as a junior, if you came as a junior front end, for example, and they're like, okay, well, we use React here, or we use Svelte here. And you're like, okay, but I've used so-and-so, so I'm going to learn this in my spare time. I'm going to build a project. I'm going to build my auntie's like cat cafe website, and then, oh, by the way, never work for family. Never ends well. But you
Don't
build
worry, we're
that.
going to get on to side hustle soon because you're the side hustler.
So you build that and you build in a piece of technology and you're like, okay, that was really fun. Maybe I can bring that back to work and be like, I use this, and you pitch that, and that's great.
Yeah.
And then as you kind of get a bit older, a bit longer in your career, you might specialize in a piece, and you're like, well, I know all the tools that I want to use, and you don't necessarily go out and learn those new things, or you're just not interested, and that's also totally fine. You have like a family, you want to spend time outside doing hobbies, spending time with your kids, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So you stop having those
basement nights where you're learning YouTubing.
or the work that you're doing has got a tight deadline, so you use the things that you're used to. Mm-hmm. And it's honestly like a big kind of force that needs to be dealt with. If you're not doing things in your work that you're touching new pieces of technology, you can very easily feel that you are out of the loop. I know a lot of people who have kind of worked in big enterprise, who've worked kind of on one incredibly small facet of a piece of technology for 2-3 years. They move into the jobs and they're like, well, I have no idea what the landscape of kind of development is right now. What can I do? Do I spend 2 weeks between my two jobs doing like a boot camp, or do I try and build something myself, or do I try and upskill in my current company? Like, what do I do? And then some people just feel like it's too much and they give up, which is really unfortunate, because you lose a lot of really good, talented people who just kind of feel a bit overwhelmed.
Does that drive you in any way, I guess, to capitalize on the skills that you have now in the best way possible?
It's not the first priority that I have, I would say. I think my first priority personally is like doing stuff that I'm interested in doing it. Obviously there's a split between that. Like you can only do so many things that you love, and sometimes you have to do some boring data entry work to kind of get some things in life. I enjoy marketing stuff. It's fun. It's a nice change of pace. Yeah.
Hey, we're like doing nothing.
I mean, that in terms of the technology is very different.
Yeah.
And then you're
redeemed.
Not necessarily having the time pressure of having a feature out,
Yeah, right.
But in terms of like, do I prioritize kind of making as much money with the skill set that I have now? I wouldn't say so. Yeah. Like, I leverage the skill set that I have and I'm learning new things, but the things that I learn aren't necessarily so I can earn more money. It's generally so I could have a better understanding of the whole like ecosystem, and then how that knowledge could be applied to different pieces. So one thing that you learn kind of early on is working on so many different things where you may not initially think that they're applicable back to this piece of technology that you've learned is apparent. Like people who get really good at farming, they go out and they have like a lifestyle block and they go and do things, will find that they can take those learnings into really obscure pieces of their life that they wouldn't have thought. So very similar to technology, and they're the same kind of sphere of ideas, but you learn so many different things, and how there's some incredibly smart people building pieces of technology out now. So having played with those and seeing what like their best kind of way of building the thing that you've built the same over and over and over and over again for the last 10 years is actually quite interesting. Yeah. And then being able to make money off that is also good.
Yeah, side hustle. So do you actively upskill?
Yes.
And is that primarily through stalking other companies and seeing what they're doing and then trying to replicate it, or YouTubing it, or do you pay for courses?
I used to do the social media thing. So like following people on Twitter, following people on various platforms, just seeing what they're building, because obviously they have an investment into getting a wider range of kind of audience and that thing. So they would be like people who are building tutorials or those kind of things. They would always be playing with the latest and greatest, and you wait until you hear something more than kind of 10 times. You're like, okay, now it's time to jump in and have a go for myself. Right. Now I'm kind of less off the socials, and I follow just some kind of like influential developers on GitHub and just various forums, and just Hacker News, and see what people are kind of releasing, and then getting involved in open source projects where people are kind of sharing the work that they've done is always a good way of kind of learning and seeing what the kind of the ecosphere of the current year is, because it changes so quickly.
Yeah, I bet.
You do have the monoliths. Like, we won't see, like, I love working in Svelte, but like we won't see the death of React for many, 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 many years, if it ever dies. Like, there's so much huge involvement in it. Like, if you're a junior now and you're thinking, what do I jump into? If you want to be making money, like, go with React for now.
Yeah. You heard it here first. A lot of first there. So on the side hustle thing, you love a side hustle. You posted on LinkedIn the other day.
I did. Yeah.
If you're looking for a developer.
No, I've actually filled those.
Oh, okay. Do not ask Ryan.
I did have someone come through. I think I asked for like a month's worth of work, and someone's like, "Yeah, we've got something. It's 600 hours." I was like, "Oh, no, sorry,
I'm busy." So, I mean, firstly, why do you do it? Because I'm generalizing and assuming here, but anyone who is listening might think, oh, well, you're a developer. I'm sure that you get paid well in your day job. Mm-hmm. What's the driving force to want to have a side hustle?
Well, this one, I suppose, in particular. So I've always done it. Like my entire career, I've done it. I kind of took the pedal off for a long time and kind of did a lot of really small projects that I was actually really interested in. So started a side business with a friend of mine, Matchstick, mm-hmm. And that was really interesting. So didn't make any money off that. It was just kind of like a passion project. And that was in like a new piece of technology that I wanted to try. Oh, yeah. And I was like, well, the stakes are very low here, so try it out. And it was great. Now is more of a unique position. Like I've got my young daughter, and then my partner is studying full time. So we've got a mortgage to pay and a child to feed. So making sure that, the coffers stay relatively full while still being able to go out and do fun things and buy bikes and do trips,
Yeah, nice. So the motivation has shifted from like fun learning to creating for your family, really.
Yeah, I'd say right now it's probably like 80% getting money and 20% do something interesting and fun.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And if both of those can cross over, that would be fantastic. I've got one that's pretty interesting at the moment. That's great.
Oh, nice. Do you think the sacrifice of the time is worth it?
No.
Really?
I don't think so, personally.
Interesting.
And where I am right now, for me personally, probably not. Like the little bits, yeah, great. But like I think last year I did well too many hours. Yeah. That was you just get burnt out. And then as soon as you realize you're like walking off to your little home office and you're just like, oh,
I have to go back there in 5 minutes to start again.
I'm like, please make me a cup of tea in like 2 hours because I'll be dying. That's when you know you need to stop. But like as a junior and an intermediate, I loved doing it. Mainly because I didn't have any responsibilities, so that was great. You just code until like 2 a.m. in the morning, which isn't healthy, but I learned a lot of things, broke a lot of things, did a lot of things that I was proud of, but you don't get that time back. And then if you make it through without having to do that, that's great. And then I think you realize that your priorities shift, and being healthy and spending time with the people that you love and doing the things that interest you outside of your work is also good.
Yeah, a little bit of balance there.
If you can.
Yeah, I guess if you have the luxury to do that, that's a good point. And so with having an additional income stream, mm-hmm. I am going to guess that there's other tax implications.
There sure is.
So how's that?
Oh, it's great. I think I asked... do
you have an accountant?
I used to do accounting. Well, I used to have an accountant because I used to do a lot of work for overseas. So it became really complicated. There's a lot of like grey areas around how you get paid, like whether they transfer you with like a Swift code, or like because I had a bank account in the UK that they'd pay me in, and then it all became very complicated, which I feel is a little bit like forced obfuscation in terms of keeping accountants in their jobs. But,
sorry, any accountants listening.
Thank you so much for saving me so much money. But now I've moved to a service just because it was all my work now is New Zealand based. I don't want to do the 11:30 p.m. calls anymore when someone is getting up and having their breakfast too. So just keeping it all local, and then it makes it a lot easier. And then they just take a capped fee per year. But this is the first year that I've used them, so we'll see with the financial year ending now if they've done the job well.
Oh yeah, you're about to really put them.
Otherwise, I'll be back to submitting my own
no. So, last question on career. I remember you also talking about the debate between wanting to become a contractor because you had potential higher earnings versus staying as a full-time employee. What was the driving decision or factors around that decision?
I think it was the kind of landscape, like we were talking about before. There was a lot of big salaries kind of being thrown around, and I think people were using contracts as well to kind of have no risk around their hires. So at that time, there was a lot of really big contracts that were coming out that were kind of 3, 6, 12 months that were pretty lucrative and like pretty tempting in terms of getting like quite a substantial pay rise. Obviously, there's risk involved with that, and there's also the kind of the things that you don't initially think of, like your KiwiSaver, your kind of sick leave, annual leave, all that kind of thing. So there's like a percentage of what you want to earn on top of what you would have for a salary, just to make sure that those things are accounted for, and also making sure that you are culpable for yourself to perhaps, okay, well, if a company was going to pay me 3% KiwiSaver, I'll make sure that I always match that if I'm getting a contract in, or I'm going to put more money aside into my kind of savings, my emergency fund, to make sure that if I'm sick, as children seem to bring home for like a full 3 months during the winter, that like I have enough money to not be working for like a certain amount of time and not like dip into the money that I don't want to be touching.
Yeah.
So it came down to mainly security for that. I think I still would go and be a contractor. I think the only really thing that stopped me was the job that I'm going to. The work is really interesting, and it's something that I actually want to be doing, rather than kind of taking an enterprise contract where I'd just be like the cog and not really probably have a lot of say, which I like to have. I like to be involved, as you know.
In the nicest way possible. Great opinions. Cool. Actually, I have one more question on the career. So on this new job, when you approached this job change, how did you tackle remuneration negotiations?
This is something that I see a lot of people do poorly. Like I've done many, many interviews for developers over the span of many years, and people generally wait to the end. They go through their 3 interviews or however many interviews, and then they start talking about remuneration, which is not great, I would say. But like I completely understand that. Like especially if you're a junior, you're trying to get into a role, like you just want to get as much as you can, and you just want people to like you and
have a job
and
security.
And make sure that you're interested in being there. So my kind of methodology around going into like I said before, I would generally ask for a salary range before I went into an interview to start with. You can't really do that at all places, and I have the luxury in the type of my job that I can ask those questions.
Can I interject? So asking for a range, I know that can be quite tricky when often the recruiter is like, oh, what are you looking for? And then you're like, oh, do I highball it or do I lowball it or whatever? How did you flip that conversation or question back to them to be like, oh, I'm not sure, what are you offering? Or how did you approach that?
So, well, before I even ask them, so before I reach out in terms of asking for that salary range, I have an idea of what I want. So if you're moving companies and you have had so you're like, okay, well, I was a junior, or I was an intermediate here, and I want to apply for a senior role, or I want to apply for an intermediate role and things like that. And you take a look and you see what people are kind of offering for those roles, and you're like, okay, well, I would love to have this amount, and like anything over that would be great. This would be the minimum that I would take a job for, and then perhaps there's some other benefits that you could look for, like perhaps I'll take a much lower salary, but I want to work 4 days a week, or I want to make sure that I've got health insurance through you, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I always have a number in mind before I go, and then I generally tell them that. So if they have the range, I'm like, well, this is what I'm looking for. And if that's not within the range, then
it's a no-go.
That's that's like my minimum. I generally don't say it's the minimum, so that's why I ask for the range, because I have the idea already in my head. Generally, if you ask people, like there's so many things that say like never be the first one to say a number. Like sit there uncomfortably for a full minute if you have to, like stare at them. It's very uncomfortable. And like it's also very uncomfortable because recruiters know that, and they'll keep asking you. They're like, so what do you want? And you're like, I'm very happy to based on my skill set and what you're looking for the role, and I'm very happy to see what you'd like to offer me. And they're like, okay, great. So what number would you like to see? And you just go backwards and forwards, until eventually someone, hopefully them, cracks and it's like, well, here's what we want to offer you. And then you're like, that's great, that's above the number, or it's below that, and then you go from there. So I've had lots of instances where I have gone in and done that process, and then they've tried to like lowball you at the end, which is a nice little red flag for anyone
or like
out there.
a big red flag. Like
they've gone to look sharp and they've bought all the red flags from the store. And then it's I think they just do it because some people are just like, oh, okay, well, I've come this far. Like this is the sunk time sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
But, 3 interviews is a lot less time than working somewhere for a full year. And then if they're not going to give you a pay rise up to what you wanted at the end of the year, then it's
you have to go through the process all again. Yeah.
Not to say that money is the only thing that you should be looking for in a job, but, it's pretty important. Gives you a lot of options, and options are pretty important in your life. But yeah, so if they're going to lowball you, you say, sorry, that's not what I'm looking for, and you just got to walk out. And I've had that before, and then, that's just it. Or they come back and they say, well, sorry, we'll match you.
Yeah, right.
That's also fine. It's a lot cheaper for them to get someone in the door than to go through the whole process again.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so in this role in particular, you had your number. Did you have any kind of requirements around other things that you wanted? Because you mentioned before you have a daughter, flexible working, things like that.
Yeah, flexible working was a big one. It's been so nice to be able to be at home, like not in the like 2 hours of commute, like be there when she gets home from kindy, or if she's staying at home with her mum, being able to like go and have lunch together, play around outside, and then kind of go back into work, and then she'll waddle in during a meeting and just hold her up in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And then be like, okay, you have to go now.
Time's over.
So that was one. And I think that's got a lot better after COVID. Like if anything good that's come from COVID, it's the companies have realized that flexible working generally leads to happier employees, and people realize that they don't have to spend, the 9 to 5 in the office, and if they're taking buses and trains and things, and you're getting home kind of just as your kids are going to bed, that's not good. But if you can spend a couple of days a week and still be in the office to make sure that you get all the meetings and things done, that's pretty good. I like that way of working.
Yeah, nice. Sorry. So flexible working, anything else that you were like, this is my baseline, health insurance?
Not really. Luckily for me, I'm at the top end of my roles, so don't have to worry about that too much. I can pretty much cover it if they didn't offer it. Mainly it was about the type of work that I would be doing and the type of work that they want to be doing in the future, and how I can facilitate their company moving forward with that, and making sure that I'm challenged and be able to participate and contribute to the kind of dream.
Yeah, cool. Nice. Love it. Okay, cool. And so coming back to your, I guess, life stage, you are a property owner, you have a child, you are on a single income.
Yes.
Just to summarize it, rapid fire.
The 70s lifestyle, right?
Yeah. In what order did those things happen?
House was first, and then child came after. I would recommend doing it that way.
If you can, yeah.
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah.
So I bought my house about 4 years ago, and then my daughter just turned 2. Well, she turns 2 tomorrow. As of the time of recording this.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. We had a lovely birthday party this weekend that my partner did 99% of the organising, and I just kind of like cleaned up at the end.
Hey, that's pretty good. A little fun organising.
It's single income. We all have our strengths,
Hopefully she's not listening.
No, she is much smarter than I am.
There you go. Okay, and so how was the property purchase process for you? And was property your sole asset focus, or have you invested elsewhere?
It was honestly very intimidating. I didn't have any knowledge of what truly was required. You kind of it's kind of forced down your throat from a young age, like property. You've got to get on the property ladder. You've got to do all this stuff. If you don't have property, then you're never going to be able to retire. That kind of stuff. Yeah. But there's not a lot about like how you're going to make that happen, or the absolute stack of documents that you have to go through, lawyers and all that kind of thing, building reports, the absolute emotional toll kind of going to auctions are, where someone's outbidding you by a significant portion, especially at that time. But yeah, it was really good. I had some advice to talk to a good mortgage broker, and they were fantastic. They did a lot of good kind of upskilling of my knowledge in that area. And then had some really good lawyers who went through the process step by step. And luckily some friends of ours had also bought at that time, so they were very happy to kind of answer questions that I had a million of them for, and they thought about billing me at the time, I'm sure. But yeah, it was honestly I was just like, can you just give me this house? I've got the money. Just give me the house. Can I just not have to deal with all this stuff? So before I used all of my KiwiSave at the time, and then my savings, and then I had like a little bit of investment, but majority of it was in savings, just because I wanted to be buying the house, so I wanted the least volatility possible to be able to, like, movements. So I had kind of everything after I came back from the UK, kind of in savings, and then absolutely scraped by. I think I had to borrow $5,000 of my girlfriend's mum, girlfriend at the time, to actually get that 20%.
Oh wow! So you were like really wanted to
really wanted it. Yep.
Was that terrifying?
It was, absolutely, because especially after having like your emergency fund and everything, and taking a gamble on kind of spending everything that you own to get into a property. But yeah, once we were in, we like lived out of boxes for a long time, and then kind of once everything got settled, and yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. And how have you managed rising interest rates? Are you guys like all right? You know, have you found it challenging?
We budgeted up to a certain percentage when we first got the mortgages, so split the mortgages into 3, and again, like going back to the mortgage brokers, were really good on kind of letting us know what kind of would be expected and what you should kind of budget for. So I think we budgeted for, at the time, I think the interest rate was like 4.5 or 4.6%. So split those into three different mortgages, and then kind of did a test on my income at the time, whether we could stress test, 7-8%, and then we could. So we were fine with taking that risk, if you will, to get in there. And then, like, worst came to worst, I'd sell the house and be back where we started.
Yeah, renting again.
Hopefully not in negative equity.
Yeah. And when you bought the house, did you buy it on 2 incomes, and then you had...
No. At the time, I just bought it on my income.
Oh, so it's your sole asset. Oh, okay, interesting.
Yes. Well, we're both
de facto
equal ownership in the house. But yes, at the time, it was just my contributions, and Emma's parents. You can't discount that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Thanks, Sharon, for that $5,000.
So I'm curious around that in terms of, did you ever want to get a relationship agreement or something coming into, I don't know if you guys were together already?
We'd been together for, this is a question that I need to get correctly. Coming up on 3 years. Okay. Just over 3 years. Oh, yeah, okay. So we were pretty serious, and it did come up whether or not to get one. We didn't get one in the end, and everything worked out. But I think if I had to give advice to someone, I'd say get one. But Hope was romantic, so I was just like, nah, we'll never split. So,
well, you have a child together, so as you mentioned before, the reason it sounds like you're doing all of this is to build generational wealth, as well as obviously your own financial security. So you're going to hope, unless you have more children, that goes all to her, right?
Yes,
eventually.
So we have an investment account for Ivy, my daughter, which we started when she was born, and have just been putting X amount in there every month or every payday for the last 2 years. Nice.
And so is it accumulating pretty well? Like, are you able to maintain the consistent habit?
It's consistent, yeah. It goes out as soon as I get paid, which is how I like to run the household. Everything goes out before I see it.
Yeah, nice. So you pay yourself first. That's good.
Yes. So I think I have like 8 different accounts, like one for mortgage, then a buffer for mortgage, input, output, rates, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then they all, I just worked out like per calendar month what they are, what I need for the end of the year, and then they just come out as soon as I get paid. Oh yeah. Okay. And I find that works really well for me personally, just because I can't trust myself with it. If it just sits there, I'll be like, maybe I'll buy something.
And so are you in a position where you can pay the mortgage successfully as well as invest for Ivy as well as invest elsewhere? Or
so I reevaluate it kind of every 3 months or so in terms of, because obviously it fluctuates depending on, well, now I'll be moving to a new role, so the salary is different, and then perhaps I'll be working a little bit more, a little bit less in terms of the side hustle, as you say. So I basically work out what we need, and then we try and put as much as we can into investment and savings, and then the money that we have left over, I just have it so it pays both of us every week. On a Monday, and just the remainder that we don't want to save or invest gets put into our accounts every Monday, and I think that works pretty well for us.
Yeah, nice. This might be a bit of a controversial question, but how do you, as I guess the income earner currently, and I'm not discounting the fact that like staying at home with a child isn't quote unquote earning income, because there is a decision to be made around, the cost of childcare and care and things like that, and that is a valuable thing in itself. How do you mentally like overcome the idea of splitting all your money? Do you know what I mean? And like,
I think initially it was difficult. I think it was just kind of like the mindset of you're kind of like, well, I was definitely raised in terms of like make your money and like make sure you go to like sharing that. And it was definitely a mindset change where it stopped becoming like my money and it became like our money. For me, it doesn't really matter that it's just me kind of earning at the moment, because like Emma's working full-time studying, so and then she does a huge amount of work around the house. I'm very thankful for doing that. But it's very temporary. Like once she gets into her career, we'll be both in, and then it's not the kind of mindset that I want to raise Ivy, like thinking about where her two parents should be earning, and then like, oh, this is my money, and then you get like a portion of it. We all move forward together, right? So we all contribute in our own ways, and mine just happens to be the cash front.
Yeah, nice. And so you mentioned that Emma is restudying.
Yes.
How did that conversation come about? Also for her to be at home with Ivy, did you weigh up the cost of childcare and then, the benefit that she could study at the same time?
I think we're just really lucky to be in the position that we have the options to kind of explore. I know that's not everyone's ability to be able to do that. So when Ivy was born, obviously you have to spend a lot of time with them, and so she was at home for like the first year, and then we were kind of just discussing what the kind of next steps were in terms of like what I would be doing and what Emma would be doing, and it was just the perfect time for us to do something where it was like, okay, well, it's gonna be hard for the next kind of 3 years or so, as if you want to go do it, but like now is the perfect time before she kind of starts school, and because it just gets harder and harder to do so. So we were just really lucky to be in the position and the right time that she could kind of be like, well, I'm going to take a look at some things that I want to do, and she found something that she had a really great passion for and is really just cracking into. So it was just really fortuitous. Really. But yeah, it has its ups and downs, but so does everything. You just gotta push through these next couple of years, and then she'll come out an absolute star. So.
Love that. She's also studying to be a counsellor, right?
Yes, she's doing her Bachelor of Health Science.
Nice. Shout out to her, because we need more counsellors.
Oh yeah. They just make it really hard to be able to do it. They're like, we need them, but also here's all these hoops you have to jump through.
Yeah. Is it 3 years? Or?
Yes.
Yeah. It's not easy.
But also like pay for yourself to go and like work in a place that you have to do mandatorily.
Oh, so it's free quote unquote free labour. Does she
no,
they
have to do
placement,
which they have to pay for themselves.
Oh,
to go
like
do,
as
which
part of studying.
Seems insane to me.
Yeah,
I'm like 99% sure that's correct. So don't at me if I'm wrong.
Don't at Ryan. Oh, I love that. So you've got the property, you've got the investment account for Ivy. Do you have any other assets?
Yeah, so we both have investment accounts. We both have index funds, obviously. You got to live and breathe the company, right? And then we have our emergency savings that I just recently moved over from kind of our savings account into the Cash Plus.
Oh, yeah.
And then, that's all we have at the moment, just because pretty much all of our money goes into living.
Yeah, fair enough.
But even if you're not doing much, just putting any kind of percentage, even if you're putting 1%, 2% of what you're earning, just learning what it's like to have something consistent, being able to just not touch it, having that kind of that discipline, and just seeing, and honestly, like you get a little bit of excited about it when you start to see those numbers kind of ticking up, and realizing that if you do something consistently and put that money away, that it does build. And then a lot of times, like numbers that you wouldn't even think that you could have reached if you were just like putting big pieces in chunks at a time, which I think was what I thought I would do. It was kind of like, oh, well, when I have a windfall or I do a end of a project, I'll put 50% in, and would never be the case because something would come up. But putting those little bits in just slowly tick over, and you start to see some good numbers. Yeah,
nice. Love that compounding effect of the habits and the money.
Luckily, it's a lot easier these days to kind of jump in and do that when you don't have to go have like the family accountant that kind of shuffles in and has all these things that they tell you what you should do, and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, English, please. Love it. Great tips. Thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on the podcast. Yeah, I am obviously really sad that you're leaving us.
Me too. But we'll still see each other.
Great.
I'll still pop in.
Yes, do. And give us some feedback.
I'm sure there'll be some side hustle work that
yes, true, actually. Yeah. But Ryan is not taking any more work except from us. Okay, cool. Let's round it out. Thanks so much. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. And we will be back next week with another episode. Until then, see you later.